everyone, and welcome to a new video of Cloud Chats with Cats. In today's episode, we will take a look at one fun exercise that we can do by using serverless functions and API Gateway. We will actually be creating a widget to display on our iPhone and check the statuses of our compute instances and see whether they're started or stopped. In order to create this widget for our iOS phone, we will be using Scriptable, which is an app that allows us to create automation by using JavaScript, and we will be able to create a script that functions as a widget. In order to achieve this, we will need to accomplish a few steps. First of all, we will need to create Oracle functions, serverless functions, that allow us to get all the OCIDs of our compute instances, and then from the OCID get the status. Then create an API gateway so we can expose the serverless functions through a REST API. And finally, we will create the script that gets that data from the REST API and creates the widget in iOS. So first off, let us start by taking a look at the serverless functions and what task each of them will accomplish. Let's start off today's example by talking about Oracle Functions first, which is the serverless implementation that we will be using in this exercise. So if you would like to, you can, of course, write the code for your functions from the start, both the code that lists all the instances in the compartment and also the code that shows the specific status for an instance, so we can display whether it is started or stopped. But in our example here, it may be easier to just use one of the samples that are already provided by Oracle on GitHub, so you can access them in Oracle Samples, Oracle Function Samples. And here you have a detailed list of examples that can be used as a startup platform for your coding needs. And if we go inside the samples folder, we can check which ones we will be using. So first of all, we're going to use OCI list instances, the one written in Python, and then we will use the OCI compute control. And we will just clone this repository, copy the two folders somewhere differently, and we can modify them. And we do need to modify them, especially in my particular case, because I am using an Apple Silicon-based MacBook. It's a MacBook Pro M1, so I need to do some changes in order to be able to properly build the containers and deploy them to the container registry online and be able to run them in Oracle Functions. So I'll tell you in a bit what we need to do. First of all, let's take a look at the general code for both OCI compute control and compute list. So we can see in functions.python here, we've got, our general handler, which creates a resource principal signer so we can connect to OCI. And then in compute list, we create a compute client and just get all the instances in the signer's compartment ID and return the list of the display name and the IDs back. In the case of OCI compute control, it's pretty much the same thing. The code is exactly the same as the one in the sample, and we are using this function to return the status of an instance depending on its OCID. Now, in order to be able to build this properly on M1 or M2 MacBooks, we need to do a slight change to the YAML. And that is, instead of using the runtime Python for both of them, we will be using the runtime Docker. What this enables us to do is to create custom Docker files for our serverless functions. And here we can actually see the Docker file that I have created. It's basically the default Docker file with one particular change. As you can see, I am explicitly specifying the platform I wanted to build for as Linux AMD 64. So once we do that, even if we're using M1 or M2 MacBooks, we will be able to build a container that then is properly started in OCI. Otherwise, if we just do the default path and set the runtime to Python, we will see that when we start we try starting up the serverless function within OCI, we will get a libraries error due to Python. Of course, this thing wouldn't happen if we were to use Java, for example. But in case of Python, we need to tell it exactly which libraries to use when building. Now, once both of these functions are ready, we can just easily deploy them using fn deploy and then giving the app that we have created on OCI, which in my case is called scriptable fn. And once we do that, the container will start the deployment to the container registry and then to the functions application itself. You may notice here that I am using Podman as a container engine instead of Docker engine. And this change is a very easy one to make. If you wish to change your container engine from Docker to Podman, you just need to do an edit on the file called config.yaml in .fn. And you need to switch up the container engine type from Docker to Podman. And that's all that we need to do. And now we can just use Podman machine start to start our Podman engine and use it to build our container. Then switching it up to Oracle Cloud, if we go inside our application in functions, we can check the application and see that both containers have been used to build the functions. We've got the invoke endpoints ready, and the functions are ready to be run. And in order to invoke them, this will start up our serverless function and return the list of all the compute instances in our compartment. Next, let's take a look at API Gateway and how we can expose the Oracle functions that we have just created as REST APIs so our widget created in Scriptable can access them. In the case of API Gateway, we need to check in Developer Services API Management Gateways, first of all, of course, the fact that we have a gateway created. If you don't already have one, like I do here, a demo gateway, you would need to create a new one for yourself here. And then once inside, we can check out the deployments. And I already have a deployment for my two Oracle functions, but let's look inside and see how I have defined them. So clicking on Edit on a deployment will allow us to see the information. As you can see, the path prefix is /scriptable. As for authentication, I am not using one for the purpose of this exercise, but of course, we should and can do in a real case scenario OAuth 2 or an authorizer function that will authorize us and allow us access then to the backend. And then as for the routes, we are using two routes. One is /compute control, which is a post because we need to send it the instance ID so it can check its status. The backend type is Oracle functions. And then I need to select my compartment, my application, and the function name, which is compute control. And the same for the second route, which is compute list. This one is a get because we don't need to send it any parameters. We just need to retrieve the list of instances in our user's compartment ID. And again, the backend type is Oracle functions, and the function is OCI compute list. Once this is ready and it has been deployed, when we go inside our gateway, we will have here an endpoint, right? And our path prefix. This is what we should use then to call our endpoint APIs. And finally, let's have a quick look at Scriptable, how we create the script and what it looks like, and how we can set it up to display the widget on our iPhone. And now for the last step, the actual script of the widget. Like I mentioned before, we will be using Scriptable for this example, which is an application that is free to use and download on the App Store that allows us to automate iOS using JavaScript. You can also download an application which is in beta for MacBook that will help you build the scripts directly on your MacBook and not have to do it on your phone. And we can also use a Visual Studio Code extension that I am using right here in order to edit easily my widgets. So the widget that we are going to use is the one that I have opened here. It's called OCI widget list. And let me run you through the code very quickly. So as you can see, we've got a variable called instances that waits for the response of getInstanceList. As you can imagine, getInstanceList is a function that will wait for the response from our REST API that's calling the serverless function, and then return a list with all the instances that it has retrieved from that REST API. So the function load items just calls our endpoint on the API gateway and returns the list of instances. And then we create a widget by using the list of those instances. And in here, we can define stuff like the application icon, a title. We are creating a type of list widget, right, where we are also setting a gradient for the background. And then we add stacks, which contain, first of all, our title. And then for every instance in the return message, in the return JSON, we create a stack where, first of all, we get the status of the instance by using the instance control function, which is called here. And then we add an image depending on the status of that compute instance. These images are uploaded to a third-party image storage option. You can check out the documentation for Scriptable in order to see how to create these widgets, and they also have a few examples readily available in the app that you can use to start developing such a widget. Now, if we want to run the widget, we need to move to our phone. By using the Scriptable app that's available on MacBook, we can also test our widget and see that it's running properly. So we need to click the button here and we can see the code, which is the same one as in Visual Studio Code since they are synced and the code is kept in iCloud. And then if we open this small window here at the bottom, we can also see the log. So clicking on play will allow us to run the widget and see the way it would be displayed on our phone. And here we have our instances in my compartment and their status. As we can see, 3 of them are stopped and 3 of them, which are basically the virtual machines that are running a container engine for Kubernetes cluster, are started. Now, in order to access the documentation, we can do that either from this application or, of course, from the Scriptable website. And this documents every function and parameter available in order to start developing your scripts. Let us also look now at the end at what the widget looks like on our phone. So, of course, in order to add the widget to the phone, we need to have the Scriptable app installed. We click on plus, we search for Scriptable, and then we need to select the dimensions of our widget. We're just going to choose the medium one and click on Add Widget. And now we need to long press to select the script that will be running in this widget. So we click on Edit Widget, and then we need to choose our script. And we are going to choose OCI Widget List. And now we should be able to see the status of our instances directly on the phone. Of course, it takes a while until it loads the first time because we need to start the serverless containers for our functions. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. I hope you found the information useful, and please let me know in the comments if you need to see anything else, if you've enjoyed this episode and what you would like to see next. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you've liked this video, and I'll catch you all next time.